Hello, AP World History students. So for lesson 1.7 here, while I'm absent, we're going to do a kind of a video exploration. And I'll lead you through some pieces of it, and then I'm going to let some other excellent teachers and filmmakers lead you through this. What I like about this is A, it gives us a break from the routine, and B, it'll give you a really strong visual sense of some of the cool pieces that are happening in China at this time. So China, 1200 to 1450, the post-classical period in Chinese history. This is primarily during the Song Dynasty, all right? And so we're going to look at a couple key continuities, cultural continuities and infrastructural continuities in Chinese history. So we're always looking at continuities when it comes to China. We will get a chance through some of the video work that we're going to do to explore their innovation and ingenuity and our long-term learning target that we're really going to live into today. I can analyze and evaluate the cultural contributions and dysfunctions of different people groups in the early modern periods. So we will absolutely see cultural contributions from the Chinese, and we're going to see some dysfunctions here too. So let's jump in. The Song Dynasty. I write this notion back to something we said earlier. Western Rome, the Western Roman Empire, once Humpty Dumpty collapsed, it never was able to put itself back together again. In China, that process happened again and again through all these dynasties. And so after the fall of the Han Dynasty, you have the Sui Dynasty, the Tang, and the Sung. And so these are, in the sort of early modern period, these are these massive dynastic states that were established. And in 1200, when our course kind of begins here, and we're checking in once again with China, we are seeing China is, China, they're an old power, right? And it's nothing new for them to have political power and be a place of innovation and economic success, societal success. That was nothing new. That was something that the Chinese were used to and proud of. That's all going to come to a smashing end. We'll get to this later on this month when we study the Mongols. The Mongol invasion that happens in stages. You can see the Song Dynasty does sort of fragment here. The Jin, northern China, the northern kingdoms in China will fall first to the Mongols, and then the Sung will fall later on. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. But our goal today is the key characteristics of China in this period of time, the things that are going on. Part of one massive important cultural continuity in Chinese history is Confucianism. And we've already spent our time with that to explore that. One reason why that became a cultural continuity was another cultural continuity, which was what's called the civil service exam. The civil service exam was a kind of a spectacular achievement. How do we fill our government positions? How do we staff our bureaucracy? Look, in most societies, in most places, you know how it's done? It's like you fill it with the nephews and the sons of the powerful, of the elite, of the nobility, right? You fill it with people who have got the connections. That's what happens in most places, right? You get your nephew a job doing something like this. And that's honestly how it happens in lots of places well into the modern age. Like the United States really didn't figure out how to staff much of our government bureaucracy based on merit until way too late in our history. I wonder if we still do sometimes, but anyway, that's a joke for a different time. So the challenge is, how do you staff this immense bureaucracy of scholars doing this bureaucratic work for the government with the finest available minds in China? And the answer to that became this civil service exam. This is an enormous, extremely difficult 3-day-long test, and the subject of it is Confucianism, all things from the master, right? It's a test that emphasized memorization instead of creative or critical thinking. And it's an enormous undertaking. It took years to study for. It was very, very, very difficult. And certainly if you could pass, then you can demonstrate some basic level of skill, aptitude. I mean, maybe not wisdom, because look, if you haven't met any well-educated fools in your life, just keep doing your journey and you'll come across a few. Like it can't eliminate that, but it can certainly create a skilled bureaucracy who's capable of some stuff like this. A village might have a poor young boy, right? A peasant village might have a young man who's seems especially capable or bright, and they could pool together resources so that that young man could study, right? And someone to tutor him, and like in that way, that young man from a peasant village might one day end up a very powerful bureaucrat or servant in the Chinese state. That level of meritocracy is really unprecedented that's not in the ancient world, in the early modern world. It's very, very difficult to find that. And so the advantages are, it really does allow for some social mobility based on merit in a way that's admirable, I think. And it ensures, like it says, a reasonably skilled bureaucracy. The disadvantage is this is also partly how military officers get staffed. That's not a great system for military officers. The question of you're a great military officer if you understand Confucianism doesn't really totally make sense, and it's a little bit of why China falls to the Mongols, but we're getting ahead of ourselves again. Also, bribes did take place to pass this thing. That did happen. I don't advise that for the AP exam, by the way. And just government bloat. Again, this bureaucracy is it's a world unto itself, and it was a bloated thing, and it did become a little, again, insular, and there's just only one ideological game in town. So that was always a funny dynamic in there as well. But it's a cool system that sort of is a continuity in their history. Another piece of infrastructure that allows for, that's a key Chinese continuity, and that allows for a continuity of economic growth is what's called the Grand Canal. The Grand Canal is perhaps not as famous as the Great Wall of China, but it's probably has more cash value. The Grand Canal is an artificial river. It's the longest artificial river in the world. If you put it in the United States, it would stretch from New York City and it would make it all the way into Florida. It connects the Huanghe River in the north to the Yangtze River in the south. Now, those two rivers are like the two major east-west flowing rivers in China, and the Grand Canal is a north-south flowing canal, artificial river, which means it's a highway. All right, it's like the interstate highway system in the United States, and it has the same sort of economic benefits that the interstate highway system has in the United States. And so in terms of being able to move around the goods in China and to sort of lubricate trade, it can do that, and that's profoundly beneficial. It's an enormous undertaking to build. It's also an enormous undertaking to keep up, and it's sort of China's going to be constantly in that process of building, maintaining, expanding, keeping it up. A less impressive continuity that begins around this time in Chinese history is the practice of foot binding. Now, on occasion, for us, we've looked at patriarchal practices, because they're interesting and lamentable, and we celebrate that that we don't do this stuff anymore. B, it's the kind of thing that the College Board likes to ask you about, so I know enough about that to say let's keep showing you examples. Foot binding is it's a nasty bit of business, guys. You take a girl's foot, and if this is her foot before, trying to do this here, if this is her foot, you kind of break it. You smash it down. You create what's called the lotus foot, which is this like little teeny tiny foot, and you wrap it up with fabric. So it's just like cracked in half and then wrapped, and then it can be placed inside these tiny shoes. It was considered to be fashionable. It's considered to be a status symbol to have this. Women, peasant women, it occurred less frequently because peasant women were needed to work, and this means you're disabled. Like once this happens to you, you can't really walk. You have this sort of funny little hobble. And some men considered that the way women walked with the lotus foot, sort of the way their hips moved was sexually provocative or some nonsense like this. I mean, they're just taking girls and disabling them. This is a screwed up system. It is women doing this to women. It would be like grandmothers or mothers doing this to their daughters because they said no one will marry you without it. Another continuity in China's history, population growth, having a huge population. How does that happen? We learned that going way back into ancient times, China always had a large population because it's an agriculturally blessed place, fertile place. That really kicks up. Look at this population growth chart here, right? So through ancient times, once we hit the early modern period, suddenly it explodes. What can explain that? Well, a new plant species, or a new variant of rice called champa rice. This rice is developed in Vietnam, So in Southeast Asia, it's brought into China. Is it that it tastes better or something? No, it grows more quickly. And so you can actually fit in 2 seasons and harvest twice per year, literally output twice as many calories from rice. And that allows for more calories equals more people. And China's population explodes. You double that with, iron plows and terrace farming like you see pictured here, like the steps in the farming and irrigation techniques, and then the Grand Canal to move this food around. And at the end result of all that, 40% of the human beings alive on planet Earth are living in China. And that is going to, more or less stay. I mean, not at that proportion, but China is going to remain an absolutely very, very populous place for the rest of history. And this is where we really see that kick into gear. And for that, we point to Champa rice and some of those other factors. For the rest of your learning experience today, I'm going to entrust your journey off to some other good teachers and some great videos. And there's a worksheet that you fill out along the way. I believe you'll enjoy it. Just let the visuals wash over you. And honestly, just wonder and delight at some of the cool stuff in China at this time. Is it all delightful? No. Some of it is foot binding. And some of it is not worth celebrating. That's a dysfunction like we mentioned in our learning target, but a lot of it is really cool. So I encourage you to do that. There is some homework. It's a reading check that is due next week. So please make sure that you can maybe get a jump start on that. Make sure you get it done over the weekend. Until then, you guys have a great weekend. God bless you. See you.